Welcome to a monthly review of international relations for the lead IAS Academy for the benefit of civil service aspirants. If you want to look at the present month, that is April, we can explain matters only if you go back a little to the advent of the Donald Trump regime. He won the elections for internal reasons, but he switched on to international relations very fast. First by making claims like Panama Canal, like Greenland, like Canada, etc. So it gave an indication that his mission was to basically destroy the law-based order in the world and create a new world order. This is something unique because no single man in history has not done so much to change the world. Of course, the world was waiting for a change because there are lots of difficulties in the world around. There are 59 wars raging, etc. But what he brought out were issues which were new in a sense. And this is what surprised everybody else. And he has gone about it not in a systematic manner, but announcing various things, various claims, various allegations, and quarreling with some countries, trying to build relationship with other countries. So it's a very complicated situation now in the world. The old world order has changed, including the United Nations having become completely ineffective. There is even a new alternative to the UN called the Board of Peace, which is also in the making. And that brings us to the current conflicts. The first, of course, Donald Trump's idea was to somehow resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. Of course, he claimed that he stopped the India-Pakistan conflict, which we do not accept. But he was seriously trying to end the conflict. It is now 4 years. And he was leaning more towards Russia than to Ukraine. So this complicated matters. The relations between US and NATO got destroyed, and he was even willing to fight with a NATO country which was necessary to get Greenland. So that is one set of problems. And then Iran issue was always there, and there are two things that he had raised. One was, of course, the question of renewing or reviewing the old agreement of 2015, which had considerably reduced the possibility of Iran developing a nuclear weapon, even though IAEA was not able to certify that they are not doing that. So he thought that the previous agreement was inadequate, and he started these negotiations. There were two things he demanded. One, of course, Iran should declare that they will never manufacture nuclear weapons. That is not really necessary because Iran has always been saying that it is against the fatwa of the Ayatollah to produce any nuclear weapon. So it is not in their program at all. But this was not trusted, and therefore in the Geneva negotiations, what the United States tried was to get this kind of a promise from Iran, and also to reduce the enrichment program. And he wanted the entire enrichment program to be suspended. This would be unrealistic to do because Iran had developed a very significant enrichment program, and it could have led the world to a proper nuclear weapon in about 5 or 6 months if Iran so decided. So the discussions were held under the auspices of Oman. The foreign minister of Oman announced on the 27th that there was an agreement. All the details were not given, but the expectation was that Iran would not pursue a nuclear weapons program for a considerable period without specifying it. And the second concern was the development of missiles by Iran. And they had very rich stock of missiles of various kinds acquired from China and Russia, and also many developed in Iran itself. The size of this stock was not very well known. But when the war started, the United States found to its horror that they had the capacity to go on forever. This was something which was not expected. The second thing which was not expected was that they would attack the Gulf countries, because Iran could not fight the United States in the United States territory. So they chose to attack wherever there were American bases in the Gulf, which created a major problem for India and our economy of the future. But initially, the president of Iran said that this was a mistake, and he even apologized to UAE and Saudi Arabia, etc. But then later they confessed that this is what they are demanding from them, that all American bases should be withdrawn from the Middle East, particularly the Gulf. This is not a practical possibility for the Gulf countries because they have built their economy, they have built their infrastructure all on the basis of these being protected by the American army, American soldiers, and American bases. So, in this context, then suddenly maybe United States realized, and even President Donald Trump realized, that this was going to be a losing war, and there was no success even after about 40 days. And therefore, the ceasefire came. Nobody asked for a ceasefire in the early stages, because when a war rages, nobody wants to say ceasefire because that creates a certain amount of partiality to one side or the other. So even India, even though people like us kept urging that on the question of Gulf itself, India must ask for a ceasefire. But our government did not do anything publicly. Maybe privately they may have spoken to Iran. Anyway, so when the ceasefire was agreed, and apparently at that time itself, Pakistan was playing a role in this after the Omanis left the mediation. The Pakistani involvement as a mediator was somewhat of a surprise, because the United States had improved their relations with Pakistan, and the field marshal became an operative person in the relationship. He was invited to the White House for lunch and so on. Very unusual relationship. So there was talk of other Arab countries or Islamic countries doing something, but that is when this news came, because we are always in some kind of competition with Pakistan. So the general sentiment among the public was that how did we fail? Why didn't India do that? Why is it a victory for Pakistan and a failure for India? Of course, the Prime Minister did not even answer that. It was quite clear. So we left it to them. And one of our spokesmen said this is just being a dalal, which Pakistan saw it as a criticism. Anyway, but they were able to put it together. That was, of course, creditable. They got the top people from both sides. I do not think they have participated in the discussion of the substance to a great extent. They only brought them together and gave them the facilities and timings and to continue this. And then when it stopped, because there was no effort was made even by the Pakistanis to seek further sessions. We do not know whether it happened or not. Naturally, a mediator would try to, extend the discussions. More than that, one problem is that Pakistan has no relations with Israel. So Israel would not have liked Pakistan to be a mediator, because in the eventual settlement, Israel will also come into the picture, and they would not like to do this with Pakistani mediation. And that is a real issue between Pakistan and Israel. And I believe President Trump does not consider that to be an impediment in the discussions. So India, partly envious of what Iran was able to achieve, and partly of the feeling that Pakistan will not be effective. We have closed that chapter. But it caused a certain amount of misunderstanding about our foreign policy, why we are not successful. There was criticism of Prime Minister going to Israel just a day before the war broke out. So all this, some confusion was created in our own foreign policy and internal criticism. But my own view is that we did not want to seek mediation. And that is our policy. After the 1965 Tashkent Agreement, where Soviet Union mediated between us, and we got a bad deal, because the mediators normally would push both sides to make compromises. And since it was Soviet Union, close friend, etc., Lal Bahadur Shastri agreed to that and made some concessions which would be criticized back in India. And since then, we have not mediated, and we have told everyone that we don't need any mediation. Trump himself had volunteered to mediate on Jammu and Kashmir, etc. So we have an allergy towards mediation, and so we would never have sought it. Even in the Russia-Ukraine, it was suggested. So we should not be really bothered about it. And whatever they have done, fair enough. But we were not in the fray for getting a mediation in this case. The problem with Donald Trump is this unpredictability. Nobody knows, even his closest associates, knows exactly what he wants to do next. And he comes out with these big surprises and also shifts. Tariff was the major weapon he was using. That he has shifted from there. Annexation of Canada and Greenland and Panama, etc., have been left behind. So he does not know when he will pick up one of these or the others. So there was no certainty about what will happen in these 2 weeks. And that is when the issue of Hormuz came up. Hormuz was not at all an issue. It was an open strait, which was controlled by Iran, with some international conventions and procedures. So some of us, like India, got some exceptions to pass through Hormuz, and some of our ships were allowed. But then quickly President Trump focused his attention on Hormuz only. He started saying that before we ceasefire, Hormuz should be completely open because the Iranians mentioned that they were mining the place and they would not allow anybody to go through. So suddenly the issue focused on Hormuz, and that happened to be the issue, and various possibilities were being discussed. And then thanks to Pakistan, and particularly the Field Marshal there, in fact, together with the Prime Minister's name, the Field Marshal's name was also mentioned by President as the people who helped them work out these deals. Anyway, we had this meeting in Islamabad, and the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament led the delegation. That is the spiritual part. And the Foreign Minister of Iran was also there. And they say they may discuss these issues for 21 hours, and during which Vice President Vance spoke to the President at least a dozen times. And then, without any warning, he came out and announced that the talks have failed. And there were two sets of proposals. One, 10 proposals by Iran and 15 proposals by United States. How many of them they discussed, we do not know. But the surprising thing was, when he announced the break of the negotiations, he mentioned that it was the issue of the nuclear capability of Iran. This was something which was settled already, and now what more are they trying to get? So that means that was a non-starter. So obviously the other things were not discussed. There were issues like compensation or like rebuilding. There are so many issues which were not discussed. So according to Vance, the failure was because the nuclear issue, there could not be an agreement. Iran's view is that the Americans were not able to create trust in Iran. So they were not sure what United States will do after the ceasefire or after an agreement, because nobody believes that Donald Trump will keep quiet and accept the reality. And therefore what they wanted was assurances of that kind, that this will not happen again, and also that there will be peace in the Middle East in general. Of course, they did not raise the Palestinian issue, thank God, but that will also come later. So now one side says it was the nuclear issue, the other side says it is the trust issue. But what they are tackling today is the Hormuz issue. There are several possibilities being discussed. United States wants it to be completely open. And he asked the NATO countries and others, he didn't ask us, but China, Spain, very many other countries, to help in keeping the Hormuz open. And that none of them accepted. Even NATO countries did not agree to cooperate with United States on this. So now the whole focus is on this. And if after 2 weeks, they have already said Americans have already placed troops, even infantry, in parts of the sides of the Hormuz Strait, and they will attack any ship which comes anywhere near Hormuz. So this is a highly volatile and dangerous situation, and for which there is no solution. And what will be the next step that Trump will take after he declares that the ceasefire is over? We have no idea. And certainly Israelis are still bombing Lebanon, and that will continue. And then what will he target and what will he demand to continue the ceasefire will be the question that will emerge in the next few days. As far as India is concerned, our main issue is the opening of a front in the Gulf. The first bombing, Iranians said that was a mistake. But later they said that they are deliberately doing this. At that time itself, India should have definitely demanded a ceasefire. After all, our Prime Minister was there in Israel just before the conflict. And that was basically to indicate that we would be on the side of the American-US, because our relations with America had deteriorated. I think so. That was probably his hidden agenda. But he went there because of a big visit, and so many agreements were signed, etc. So on the strength of that, I thought it would have been very fair for us to ask for a ceasefire at that time. But we did not do that. This, I believe, is because when the Prime Minister kept telling Putin last 2-3 years that this is no age for war, it is not the time for conflict, was objected to by the Russians. And it was supposed to be a kind of mediatory solution. But apparently the Russians did not like our Prime Minister saying repeatedly, this is not the time of war. And they thought that we were, siding towards Ukraine or whatever. Anyway, so now our problem is basically the Gulf situation. And if they say that they'll continue to bomb Gulf, particularly UAE and Saudi Arabia, there'll be very serious implications for us. India has about 90 lakhs, about 1 crore of Indians there. and they're all dependent on these Gulf states for their employment, for their profession. The remittance has already gone down by 20%. Many have come away without knowing whether they can go back. Flights are not available. For the election, very few people came to vote, and even Vishu celebrations have been subdued this year because people did not come on holiday from the Gulf. So that is our concern as far as India is concerned. But as far as the competition is concerned, all of us have to understand the origins of the conflict, the details of the conflict, and the likely outcome. Of course, in the UPSC examination, more of facts and analysis that they would require, not predictions of the future. More importantly, the analysis of what happened and what you think is the solution. With this, we conclude the review of the international situation for the month of April. We look forward to seeing you again next month for another review. Thank you very much.